Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Micflayers podcast, coming to you from a number of far off and distant lands. After all, it's dangerous business, Martin. Going out your door, stepping onto the road. If you don't keep your feet, there's no telling where you might be swept off to. I'm your host, Conor Martin, and joining me as always is my co-host, Mr. Martin O'Dwyer. How are you today, buddy?
I'm good. The Habit.
Uh, Bilbo, but I think he says it
Yeah.
in Lord of the Rings.
Sorry,
but yeah.
That's it. Yeah. He's on about adventure sweeping you off your feet. No, honestly, that's a great quote, so I'm not going to complain. But yeah, it wasn't.
Oh, it is. That's solid quote.
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. It's been a good week. Fox Machina finished and was excellent.
It was.
Yeah, we won't give spoilers, but the last episode was the thing I was very much looking forward to seeing animated for the entire series. Kind of forgot about it halfway through, and then in the last two episodes went, oh yeah, this is going to happen.
Yeah, I was really happy with how it turned out. Again, I won't give any spoilers, and I'm hoping it's not a bias because obviously I'm a big Critical Role fan. I'm hoping it's not a bias, and I'm not just living off of the nostalgia of that that stream I used to watch 5 years ago, or whatever. But I feel like the show had no dull episodes. Like something interesting or action packed or funny happened right the way through. I don't feel like there was a single lull episode as far as I'm concerned.
I think the first two are definitely worse than the rest of them.
Maybe.
Like,
I mean, okay, I would say worse is
episode
putting
one
it
is
harshly.
episode one is easily the worst episode.
Yeah, but I would still say it's the worst of a solid bunch of episodes.
Yeah.
Like even episode one is still really good. Just in comparison, it's not as good because episodes 1 and 2 have a separate arc, that a mini arc they're following, and the rest of the show then has this insane, really dark arc that they follow, which is really cool. So I would say, yeah, I see where you're coming from. I would hesitate to say worse. So I would say not as good or slightly less good.
I was actually watching Davy Chappie was pretty critical, hilariously, of the show. But he said it was like an acquired taste, is what he described it as. And I didn't fully agree with him on a lot of the stuff he said. But one thing I've seen from people I know who have watched it, who have gone on to watch it, who weren't familiar with Critical Role or D&D, was that when the first 3 episodes came out, a friend of mine watched it and he was like, yeah, it's good, I really liked it. And then the next 3 came out and the next 3 came out, and it wasn't until this third batch of 3 came out and I said it to him again. I was like, what? So what do you think of it now? And he was like, it's amazing, absolutely love it, this is incredible.
Yeah, I think we're in a very I'm not going to say unique position because there's plenty of people out there who are very much in the same boat as us, but we're in a position of a very particular viewpoint on it, whereby we know the show, we watched campaign 1, we know the plot points and the characters and all this kind of stuff.
Dude, I am so excited to see Earthbreaker Groon. Oh my god, Earthbreaker Groon. Yes, give me that fight animated.
There's we get, like, us having seen it in the stream and seeing that now realized as an animated show, really well animated show, is really exciting. I can completely understand though if you brought someone in who wasn't, like, for example, I think maybe, I don't know, if you brought someone in who had no familiarity with Critical Role, the stream, and then sat down and watched that, would they probably wouldn't enjoy it as much, or at the very least it would take a lot more time for them to get into it. By episode 1 I was in, but then again, I'm like, oh, I know these characters and they're all doing their own voices and everything like that. It's really great. But I think for someone else, like you said, it could take like a couple episodes, or maybe, like I said, the first 2 episodes are one arc and it's good. Yeah. It's not as good as the rest of the show. But we'll say if you get 2 episodes in to up to like episode 4 of 12, I think most people could get pretty well sucked in at that point.
Yeah, I think episode 2 ends pretty strongly as well. To be honest, with like the dragon fight and stuff, and like them all working together to take it down, and kind of the first time you see them properly working together as a team. At least because I've been watching like reaction videos and stuff, and people absolutely love that fight. They absolutely adore that fight.
It is a great scene. Because you see that it's perfectly,
it shows everyone's
blended, that everyone has everyone has their turn. We obviously I think Tara said it last night. We were hanging out last night. We had 2 drinks and stuff like that.
That's
Tara brought it up at one point, and she was like, "Oh, can I just say, by the way, why the hell is Keela saving them every single day?" something goes wrong and it's like, oh, Keyleth better do some mad druid stuff. I almost said a
Yeah.
different word.
Yeah.
Some mad druid stuff to get us out of this mess. But I mean, like that's honestly representative of what druids are like in D&D. Druids are really versatile, really powerful class.
Oh god, druids are so goddamn good. And like, yeah, what I find hilarious is that with Keyleth stuff is that I remember at the time of the stream, Keyleth and Marisha in particular got so much shit
They did,
for her
yeah.
character and stuff. And then the animated series has come along and they do the whole like you know what, they do her whole story of like I'm not confident in myself or in my own abilities or my own power, and I'm like self-limiting myself with my own lack of confidence. And that whole arc that they bring through to the end of the show like is really really awesome. I've seen so many articles going up on like Polygon and Kotaku and stuff where they're like talking about how like Marisha Ray and Keyleth were done dirty in the original live stream by the fans and everybody else because Keyleth is great. And like
Yes.
she is great. I absolutely adored Keyleth. But there's like so many articles now if you like look it up, like even if you just look up like Critical Role and stuff, there's so many articles where people are like, Keyleth is the MVP. Why did no one give Keyleth the credit she deserved in the original stream? It's actually just so entertaining just to see that kind of whole swing back around.
I think some of that came from like because here's the thing. I think a lot of people who either hadn't seen D&D until they discovered Critical Role, or hadn't seen, or had seen D&D but never in the capacity that Critical Role presents it, had maybe never seen people taking their characters so seriously at the table, like really, really delving into who their characters are and what they're feeling and what they're about. And I think people, in the same way that like Vax and Grog had a rivalry in campaign one, and that's in the show as well.
Yeah.
But they have a rivalry, and then so they're always kind of like teasing each other and stuff like that. But people like there were people, honest to God, thought like that Travis and Liam hated each other. They're like, oh, Travis and Liam don't get along at all because their characters are always fighting.
Yeah.
But it's like no, they're just playing a part. Because if you watch them then in campaign two or campaign three, like they absolutely get on. They're really good friends. But people like see what their character is doing and think that's indicative of the person. Likewise, Marisha playing Keyleth in campaign one seems a little bit helpless. She's a bit clueless. Sometimes she doesn't know what to do. She's like
She's naive.
she's very naive. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think people see that and go, God, I hate Marisha. She doesn't know how to play the game. No, Marisha's playing a character who isn't super capable, but learns to be over time. And it's honestly, it's so well done, particularly if you look at her like in the Craghammer arc at the start of the stream, and then look at her by the time she's named Voice of the Tempest towards the end of the campaign, and she has like insane ninth level spells and crazy stuff that she can do. So she really kind of like she has a brilliant character arc, and I think Marisha plays her so well.
The one I always remember from the first stream was it wasn't even like a big moment or anything, but they were on like an airship flying to look for a vestige. And there was like a giant lightning storm, and they were like, "Oh, we're gonna have to go around the lightning storm." And then Marisha's like, "I walked to the front of the ship and cast control weather and split the storm in both of us." And I was like, "That's so cool!" She literally just stood at the front of the ship like a maidenhead and just like control weather. I moved the storm. Like, oh, that's so cool. I love druids.
Oh, so she had honestly, I think. Yeah, I think people just got really wrapped up in the character and mixing up the character and the person and not realizing that Marisha, an actress, was playing a character who happened to be very naive, but that's not indicative of Marisha necessarily, you know. So yeah, no, I think the show did her much more credit, while also remaining true to the character. I just feel like they didn't change her. She still has the same temperament, the same voice, and the same kind of mannerisms, but they present her in a way that it's a lot more obvious that this is the character, because you're not looking at Marisha on the screen thinking, is she in character right now, or is this Marisha saying this, you know?
Every reaction channel I've seen has also compared her to Jean Grey, which I love.
Oh really?
Yeah. As soon as she's like started freezing everything and doing that stuff, like 2 or 3 channels I watched to react to it were like, oh, Jean Grey vibes here. She's going like, this is like some Dark Phoenix stuff or whatever. And I was like, oh, you've no idea, man. You've no idea.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic show. If anyone listening hasn't watched it, absolutely get on. It's on Amazon Prime.
Indeed.
And it's really, really good. It's 12 episodes, and they're short. They're half-hour episodes.
23 minutes, I think.
Yeah. So you'll fly through it, like, but it's honestly there's no I don't feel like there's any even in the pacing episode to episode. There's no real lull moments. It's like everything is very engaging and very relevant. There's no bit to it. There's an absolute ton of references if you watch the stream. There's a absolute ton of references.
Particularly in the
There's
background, like they'll just stick like a million items from like campaign 1 and campaign 2 in there.
Yeah, there's a bit I saw someone I didn't notice it when I watched it the first time. Actually, no, I shouldn't say that because it's a bit of a spoiler. I'll leave that bit out.
Okay.
There's a bit where no, screw it, I can't say it. There's no way I can say it without giving up some of the things. So we'll leave it off.
Yeah.
Martin, we're going to talk about something today on our podcast where we talk about D&D things.
We went on a bit of a journey to get here, but I guess it's about time we started. For our audio viewers, Connor is just making a dumb face for the last 10 seconds.
And pointing at Martin because he said journey, and that's what we're talking about. Not the band, not the fantastic band. No, we're talking about travel in D&D. And I mentioned this last week because Jenny D put up a video about travel and also highlighted that pretty much every D&D YouTuber at one point or another has done a video about travel. And it's like, oh, maybe this is something people have difficulty with. And I thought we'd kind of go through some of the rules for travel, some of the different mechanics that surround it, maybe some of how we implement travel in our world, and then some of the different ways that you can kind of accommodate travel in your homebrew as well. So when we're talking about travel in D&D, there's a lot of different reasons your characters will travel, that they'll leave the village or leave the city and go to the next town or go up into the mountains, into the dwarven mines, or travel across the entire kingdom to reach a dark mountain with a pit of lava at the bottom of it. You need to throw a ring inside. There's a bunch of different reasons your characters could leave or need to go somewhere. And as such, then that requires you guys as a party to travel overland. Now, some people, some DMs aren't very fond of travel. And I get why. There's a lot of mechanics. It can almost seem a bit cumbersome or tedious depending on the ways you approach it. In the DMG, there is a section that talks about doing it in like a montage or doing it hour by hour.
Yeah.
And I think there's merit to both, but I do feel like the hour by hour one can be quite tedious. One thing I actually don't have notes on here, but we'll probably talk about it in a bit, is camping, like sleeping. Where do you set up your camp? Who keeps watch? During the watch, how do you determine if something's going to happen? That kind of thing. So first thing about travel is that normal characters in D&D move at a pace of about 25 miles per day, give or take. Now that can mean when that's them on foot, and that's them just kind of like walking along a road, following it to the next town. And it's a decent enough pace depending on how you scale your world. But then of course you can get things like horses and mounts and all this kind of thing that could either. I find when I'm kind of calculating how long it's taking you guys, depending on how you do it, I'm thinking about, is this going to be a like straight line thing because you're in an airship or on a flying mount and you can just go as the bird flies, or is this a thing where like you are where you're in it, you have to follow the road, which means going around this mountain, therefore taking more time. When it comes to travel in your homebrew game, your home game, I should say, how do you implement travel? How do you address it, or do you even address it?
So recently, I've not had. Actually, they've done a lot of traveling, but most of it. See, if a druid would transport via plants, Connor. So
that's fine though.
It is, yeah. So it makes things pretty interesting when they want to go places, particularly because he can also scry, so he can just scry on the area, see a tree. Okay, I can transport via plants now, which is grand. But no, honestly, travel is one of the things I think I actually struggle with as a DM, just because I do struggle to think of a way to make it more interesting, in terms of like what I'm describing and stuff. There's only. And I always go back to, for me anyway, it's not necessarily travel, but like even like, when you're like if you're in like a mine or an underground cavern, and there's only so many times you can say like the tunnel you're in is like dimly lit and it twists and turns in the Underdark, and you travel for about 150 feet down the shaft, and then to your left a side path opens and you go down that way into the dark, and oh no, there's a pit of spikes down there. Like it's I find that gets very very tedious and repetitive. And I find a similar issue with travel, where unless there's a specific area that they're traveling through that have set up that to be dangerous, or just to know, like when that one stretch of time when I actually did do a long travel section where they traveled through 5 different zones, and each zone had different challenges. But like if it's just generic travel, like we're going from one town to the other, and there's like it's mostly just like fields and maybe the occasional hill between us, I'm like, okay, it's probably going to take you guys like 24 hours to like go get from this town to this town based on the distance, because you've horses or whatever. Recently I did give my guys a skyship. Well, basically a skyship. They were hiding out in a giant area that was like a refinery castle for like crashed ore, for like ore and stuff. So when the 2 giants landed with their ship that's meant for just 2 giants, which is perfect size for like 8 like medium humanoids or whatever, they landed, they killed the giants, and then they went, oh, ship. So they took the ship and blew up the castle.
As you do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It started dropping. I was like describing it dropping from the sky, and my guys were like, do we know where that's going to land? I was like, not really. No.
Yeah.
You think it might be near the sea?
That was a similar thing with you guys a while back, where you boarded an airship that was kind of hovering above a city. It was an Imperial airship. You were like, let's destroy this one so it can't pursue us, and then hijack the other one. And you lit a fuse on all the black powder inside of that thing, and it went off, and it basically split the ship in half. It basically blew up in the middle, and the ship fell in 2 parts on the city below. And only for the fact that the bad guy that was there was really powerful with like telekinesis and stuff like that. He managed to not stop it, but he kind of like nudged it to the side, so it fell closer to the lake, and kind of crashed in. I think it still clipped a couple of buildings, but it didn't level an entire city block, basically.
We're the good guys.
Yeah. Yeah, that is still up for debate in Temurai.
It'll be fine. We'll just kill anyone who disagrees.
So when it comes to travel, there's a lot of different factors that can kind of come into it. Like you said, making travel interesting. I feel like the line between travel being interesting and being tedious is very, very thin. There's a lot you can do with travel, but I also feel like if you do all of it, is that a lot? You know, like for example, we talk about pace, right? So when you're traveling, just say for talk's sake, we're talking about you guys traveling on the road, either on foot, in the carriage, or on horse. It's the most standard form of traveling you're going to find in D&D. You get to pick your pace first of all, whether you want to move slow, like regular pace, or fast. If you move fast, there's rules in the book in the DMG where you have disadvantage on perception checks, which makes sense. You're going to get there faster, but you're not going to be able to watch your surroundings as carefully, and you may even run into a trap. You may not see that there's a spike pit in the middle of the road or something like that. And you also can't move stealthily if your horse is galloping down the road at absolute full pelt, you know. And then you have like you can move normal pace, in which case you can make perception checks, no problem. You can't quite go stealthy though, because you're still, you're not being cautious enough. And then you can move slowly if you want, but it takes twice as long to get anywhere. You can move stealthily, you can make perception checks, but you're taking twice as much time to get anywhere, you know. Pace can be good, I think. Pace can be, if you put the pressure on the players in the right way. If you're like, oh, that guy's got a day's head start on you heading to this other town, and if he gets there, he's going to kill this person or steal this thing, what are you going to do? And you might think, we need to get there before him, or at least catch up with him. We have to go at a fast pace. But that can be really good. The players understand the pressure of the drama of the situation that needs to be resolved. And I think having those options is nice. There's also pardon me. There's also weather. So you can do temperature, wind, and precipitation. Again, I actually like these more so than maybe the pace thing. The pace thing is fine. I like these more so because it's something the DM rolls. I basically rolled 3 d20s, one for temperature, one for wind, one for precipitation. But actually, depending on the environment, that can be really interesting because, for example, I think you guys fought on the side of the road against a powerful Fey knight at one point. And I think, I think Gavin had disadvantage on perception checks because there was, or not perception, but ranged attacks because there was such a high wind at the time. And I mean like that, but I mean like I kind of like that because I like things in Dungeons and Dragons that take away bits of control from me as the DM. I like going, oh, you guys are heading into this place. I'm gonna roll on this chart. I don't know if it's gonna make things easier or harder for you, but it's kind of like it's liberating when I don't have control of the situation, when I can just go, well, we'll see what happens. And it's totally up to the dice. And if that ends up being really challenging, it can be engaging, but you guys also aren't going to turn to me and go, Connor, you were way too hard in that session. I'm just going to be like, yeah, I rolled a 20. That means it's a thunderstorm, you know? Um,
Yeah,
I do like them. Like what?
So I was just gonna say I do a similar thing with my guys, but what I do is I roll the d8, and I pick a person and I say roll a d20, and then I roll it again, and I pick three. I pick three out of the four to roll d20s and determine what the weather is. It's the same three as well.
Oh, yeah. That's I mean, yeah, I mean, the D20 is maybe. If it were me, I'd actually. Well, if it was me, I am me. But
Who am
if
I?
I if I was gonna change it, I'd actually change it to a D12 specifically because I feel like D12s do not get enough rolling time, and I think they feel really good to roll. Um,
I get a lot of value from d12s this campaign. It's pretty great.
yeah,
Yeah.
the good old barbs. But yeah, so I feel so there's that, and then you have navigation as well, like which I would not have you navigate if you're following a road.
No.
If you're just strolling on the road, it's probably well signposted. It's going to be like capital city this way, or this such and such a mine this way up the hill. It's going to be relatively well signposted, and there will be some level of navigable road, navigatable
Yeah, navigator.
navigatable road. But that could be like that could then be wisdom checks for survival or even perception on top of that. So there's like three things, right? Before you even think about encounters, whether they be hostile like combat things or not, before you even think about traps or ambushes or anything at all, you have three things you need to think about, and I like them. I think the mechanics of them are great, and they can add a flavor to your traveling. But I feel like that, and then coupling that with encounters and a bunch of other stuff, can be a lot for the DM, and maybe a little bit overwhelming for players as well to have to be like, okay, I'm gonna roll this survival check to navigate, and the weather is like this, so we have disadvantage on these things, and also we're gonna choose to do at this pace. They have to make a bunch of decisions every time they set out on a journey.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I can get it. Like, I think you were very right earlier when you said the thing with travel is like it's a very fine line, it's a fine balance, and like
Yeah.
even if you're doing good travel, like you think you're doing well, you're kind of trying to engage people and be more narrative with it. I think even if you're doing that well, there's still a danger of overdoing it, and like cause like travel like it's a thing that always comes to mind when I see people talking about they're extremely like they have a D&D world that's like very survivalist and hardcore and realist and stuff, and I'm like
Yeah.
and my reaction to that is always it's extremely impressive that you've gone to this level of work, and put this amount of effort in to make this system for your world. It's not my style. I don't want it in my game, but I'm happy it's in yours and you enjoy it and your players enjoy it. But it's not. I think honestly, like in my opinion, I think that's a bit of a waste of time. I think it could be spent elsewhere, doing other stuff in your world. And I think with travel, it's kind of similar in that like I think you just have to strike the right balance for you and for your players. I've had like I like to do weird if I'm doing like different travel, like if I'm doing travel, usually it'll be something different and weird. Like say there was that session where they were traveling through that desert area that was influenced by 5 different planes, and they were like regularly swapping through. This week I actually did. They're coming towards the end. They've one castle left and then the giant home city, and they'll be done. And God, I can't wait to get out of this arc. I've never written 9 castles again. But the castle that they're in now is like this. Like they opened it up, and the whole area around the castle is all like even the light in like a radius around it is dimmer. This like black mist like seeps out of some of the openings in the castle. They looked in. They had like a bird scout in, and they looked in, and it's like inside the castle is this like giant galaxy scape with just like cosmic gases and wormholes and stars and all these things opening up. And the last session before the one I DM'd ended with my rogue tying a rope around him, tying it to the blood hunter, and then running and jumping into the space at full speed. So the reason I bring this up is because once they all got into this area, to get into this space, they have to make a charisma check to have the will to move forward.
Right.
And then once they can move. And then I've had it where like I believe it was like the Blood Hunter and then an NPC were left at the front door because they were like being the anchor for the rest of the party. They all tied ropes around each other to travel in case they like just drifted off into space.
Right.
Which is fun to see them try and work out the rules that I had made up for this place. But they got the whenever you want to move, you have to make a charisma check. And charisma check, once you had made it, it wasn't a super high DC, but it was high enough that you could fail. So like at one stage, my rogue tried to go forward, and he made the charisma check. And it was like this. So I describe how this like path that looks like shattered crystal and starlight just emerges in front of them and leads them off up further back into the room, up towards this big like purplish gas space cloud that seems to be like glowing. And they've done other stuff in here as well where they like fired magic stones in there, and it looks like the faster something moves through the space, the quicker and more immediately it slows down once it gets past the halfway point in the room. So like when they were testing it out, my rogue shot his sniper rifle into the space, and I like described how like the bullet like rockets out of the gun, like because fucking moves fast, like rockets out of the gun, gets past the halfway point of the room, gets to about 80 feet into the room, starts to slow down, gets to the 100 feet mark, and basically with the same amount of force that it shot out of the gun, it immediately slows down and just sits there floating in space. And then gets like ate by a wormhole and spat out by another wormhole and stuff. And it was just really fun to watch them try and figure things out. And so like if I do something weird with travel, something with travel where it's going to be a major feature, I'll usually make it a little more interesting than just, hey, I'm traveling through these mountains or through this thing. Oh, I did a frozen maze once covered in fog. That was fun as well.
Two things I want to raise to you. One is a very good world building tip you've incidentally mentioned there is when you mentioned that you're never writing 9 giant castles again. Here's the thing, folks. If you want to be like, the 9 lords of the Nazgul, that's really awesome. But you got to name 9 individual lords and have different personalities and stat blocks and all this other crack. So yeah, like if you think, the 7 secret cities of this thing, could it be the 3 secret cities? Can you fit that many secrets into just 3? Do yourself a favor and make it just 3 cities.
Like, don't get me wrong, I'm really happy with the stuff I've come up with in these castles, because the fact that I did 9 made me do the sci-fi stuff, and I'm doing some actually, because this will come out after we play the session. I can mention that I basically stuck a Doomwake giant in this castle from Theros.
That's very cool. Yeah.
And so the whole area here is like a dreamscape. The guys haven't quite figured that out yet, but the whole part of the session was they all traveled together, and eventually they're traveling on this like crystalline starlight path that brings them up around through this area, and eventually the path stops in front of this like 15-foot tall kind of translucent colorless image of a deity, and I literally described Nyx from Hades as the goddess of night, because in Theros the Doomwake giants are Nyxborn. They're giants that come about because in a city a bunch of humans are afraid and have nightmares about something coming to destroy the city. So a Doomwake giant forms to fulfill that dream.
Oh, it manifests out of that.
Yeah, it manifests out of their fears. So I did a thing where once they got to this, then these 4 constellations at like the 4 cardinal points appeared around them, and then each of them chose one, and they went in, and we got 3 out of 4 done that week, and they each went into an idealized version of their own backstory world. So for my pirate rogue who has issues with his father, he came back to an idealized version of the family palace on the day he was due to be crowned king. For my sorcerer, whose arc it was, she was back in her home that's completely safe now. Everyone is back safe. She's now the leader of the town, and it's her duty to start the harvest festival. And she did really, really great with that. And then the third one I got to do as well was Mike's character Mandroy, who was now the leader of his druidic tribe, and had opened up a series of 5-star onsens across the entire world. Was a business magnate, because that's something he'd always been going on about.
I shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, he also had a giant weed farm, because they're druids and they can just grow plants, Martin. I'm like, yeah, they can. I guess okay, fine.
Long bottom leaf.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the kind of like that weird travel I like to do, where it'll be like, if I'm gonna highlight travel, it's not just gonna be you're going through a mountain or you're going through this. It's going to be like, it's going to be a bit out there.
No, I think it's a really good way to approach it. I mean, like, and actually that brings me on to a point I was going to bring up. What if the journey, what if the travel is the quest? You know, what if we make it more than boiling it down to the simple weather mechanics, pace mechanics, navigation, having an encounter, rolling random tables. I hate rolling random tables. I think they're the worst. I like that they're there. I like that you give me the option, but if I have people traveling along a road, I'm not going to roll on a random table because all of a sudden then my players are like walking through a place that's like maybe infested with undead and stuff like that, and maybe there's I don't know, some giants involved as well, and then I roll on the table and it's just like, oh, 12 orcs attack, and I'm like, there's no I know in my homebrew world there are no fucking orcs anywhere near here. That makes no sense, and it's also it just seems like busy work. When random tables always seem like busy work to me, and just like filling time. Whereas I would much rather take the time on a journey to make it about something meaningful. And I think there's some really good examples. I thought of two. You could probably tell me about more. Of examples where the journey is the quest. Obviously, we have Frodo, the
Yeah, I
Ring,
was gonna
Lord
say
of the
Lord of the
Rings.
Rings. Yeah.
Most it's the I think I don't know if it necessarily started the idea of a quest journey kind of thing, but it definitely brought it to the forefront. And most D&D, most early D&D is based on these kind of things. All the Dragonlance books are. I was watching a video about it. All the Dragonlance books are based around this kind of quest style journey kind of thing as well. So that it's a culture that's been around for a very long time, and again, mostly because of Tolkien, if not entirely. And Aragon, at least the first book in Aragon, is very much about. And again, Aragon's very derivative of
it's,
Tolkien and stuff.
it's very, very
But I mean,
derivative, yeah.
Aragon meets an old man who lives in his village who happens to be a former dragon rider, and then they embark on this journey south to go and reach these mountains where the dwarven rebels are living and stuff like that. And the whole first book is a journey like that. It's about them getting to this place. And it's you know what, again, they're very derivative, but they're decent enough books. Like I
Yeah.
think they have some good bits in them, and some okay world building.
The latter books,
Um,
yeah, a lot more interesting and a lot more like developed.
Yeah.
Because
But do you think of any other ideas where the journey is the quest? The traveling isn't just something you need to do so you can get to the next town to do the thing you actually want to do. It's part of it. It's getting there is actually rolled in with it.
First season of Wheel of Time.
Oh yeah, yeah, good call. Because they a lot of the first season is spent, and I presume the
Yeah.
book as well, obviously, is about getting to the White Tower. They have these people, but they're in someone's pursuing them. They're in danger. They need to get to the White Tower where they know they'll be safe.
And then when that there's a point in the first book slash series where they come very like Lord of the Rings. The company breaks and takes separate directions, and but
The
then
fellowship is broken.
exactly the wheel is broken, or the group the party splits up into ones and
They
twos.
split the party.
Yeah,
They were doing it.
the party splits up in ones and twos, and then they all take their own separate but very different journeys. I actually think Robert Jordan does travel really, really well in Wheel of Time, because there's a lot of it in there, and I'm never like reading it going, okay, get to the point,
Yeah, yeah.
like get to the point, Bob. But yeah, let's see, Wheel of Time. I don't know why he keeps jumping out to me, but Road to El Dorado, which I don't think is even correct.
I would say no. I would say like the don't get me wrong. The goal initially is for them
Yeah.
to get there, but then the rest of the movie kind of follows the idea of them impersonating gods.
Why can I not think of movies now?
No, it's fair. I put you on the spot. But I mean, yeah. So I mean, the idea of the quest journey is there, and I think we talked about it last.
I'm literally looking at a stack of books on the floor trying to figure out of a lot.
So like last week I mentioned a session I ran for you that it was essentially a travel quest, like a mini quest as you were traveling. But I wouldn't have put you guys on that had I not wanted to make it relevant to what was going on. Now that's not to say you can't just have a random horde of orcs or some goblins come out of the woods and attack people on the road. Perfectly fine. But I feel like if you overdo it, you're going to spend a lot of time that you could be in sessions doing very meaningful things that have to do with the overarching story or someone's backstory or something like that, and you're just I don't want to say wasting, because if you're having fun, it's not wasted, but you're spending a lot of that time and energy doing something that isn't going to have a large narrative impact. And I think that there's some great stuff in like Lord of the Rings, where like obviously the initial journey is we have to get to Rivendell. We have this ring. We got to get to Rivendell, and then
Yeah,
they go out into the wilds. And Aragorn was definitely rolling survival checks there,
he totally is.
and doing damn well at it too. And then the other hobbits were just like, oh, let's light a fire at the top of this hill where everyone can see it. Uh, but
Yeah,
yeah, no, but I think like, and then so they get to Rivendell, and then obviously they go through the mines of Moria, and that like I think that the
I have
mines,
no memory of this place.
yeah, I think the mines are, even though it would seem like it's really out there, it's like dwarves don't really come up a huge amount other than Gimli in Lord of the Rings. So the fact that like you go into Moria and you see dwarven culture and you see this place that goblins took over and killed everybody, and Gimli gets to have some character development there, and we see some other stuff with like Gandalf telling Frodo, "Oh, we're being followed by
Yeah,
Gollum," and all that stuff about what was it? Pity that stayed that Bilbo's hand and stuff like that. Which is a real growing moment for Frodo, because otherwise he might have just stabbed Gollum the first time he saw him without
yeah.
even thinking about it. But which debatably, I don't know, for the better. I don't know. Realistically, he wouldn't have made us a Mount Doom without Gollum, despite all the hardship.
Well, if yeah, this is true, and also if like Gollum wasn't there, Sam would have probably had to push Frodo into the lava.
Oh yeah, oh true, and he wouldn't have done it.
No.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think you can make the travel, the journey part of it, and I think it's about. I think if you're going to do it, personal opinion, avoid. You don't have to say personal. All opinions are personal. Um, my opinion, avoid random encounter tables. I think they're a nice tool to have, but I don't think I've ever used them, because I want to. If I'm going to make an encounter, I'm going to pick something that I feel like fits the what's going on in the world. I think in our first campaign, you guys were traveling from Murderstone up to Kelshire, and then a place called White Orchard and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then High Crossing was the last one. But anytime you were on the roads there, I might put you up against some bugbears or some goblins, stuff like that. But there was a goblin warband in the area. That's why they kept showing up. And at the end, when you got to High Crossing, there was a bit of a siege happening at the bridge. And you guys went in and you actually ended up killing the hobgoblin leader of all them, and they kind of disbanded after that. So I feel like it plays into what is happening in the world. I'm not just going, here's some jackal wares. Okay, now here's some spiders that come out of the forest. Now here's some goblins. We're making things fit in the world, and the idea that there had been a couple of towns under siege by these goblinoid war bands and stuff like that was something that was affecting the entire area. It wasn't random, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Encounters shouldn't be random, despite us having a wealth of resources when it comes to random encounter tables. I think encounters shouldn't be random. I think they should be planned and have bearing in the world and be intentional, so as to enrich the experience for your players instead of just giving them busy work.
Yeah, totally. And like, just to go back on what you're saying about random encounters and random tables, there is an interview with Matt Mercer that has always stuck in my head regarding this, and it's because he's talking about, I'm pretty sure it's Matt Mercer. He's talking about like an early DM he had, and he said no matter where they were, no matter what they were doing, 15 barbarians would jump out of a bush like every single time, and it'd be like, where are these barbarians coming from? We're on an open road, there's just one bush, we can see it all, it's like 5 foot
It's
tall.
like a clown car of
Yeah.
barbarians coming out of one bush.
And it's like a 5 foot bush. It's like, the dude is like 6 foot tall, how's he hiding? How's him and his other 14 friends hiding behind this bush?
It's like that scene in the Hobbit, in the first Hobbit movie, where Gandalf was like, this way, and he just disappears in behind a rock, and it's like a secret passage that's like hidden or whatever.
I thought you were going to say that bit in the Mulan remake where they all run in a line to hide their numbers, which is just the dumbest thing I've heard in so long.
It only works for the guy standing directly above the main gate, and then everyone else, even 5 feet to his left or right, can see that there was a big line of people.
It's so, oh god, it was so dumb. That's like,
really
but
was.
that's at least like entertainingly dumb. Just like the 15
Yeah.
15 barbarians in a bush, like. Oh my god.
Was he saying that like they would roll random encounters, and it was always like
Yeah, he was saying like they'd be
you kept
traveling.
getting the same thing on the random encounter tables?
Yeah, no, just like where they'd be traveling, and wherever they were traveling, there was a bush with 15 barbarians in it. Like, they just
Yeah,
be
I
going
mean,
down
like
a random road, and then like 15 barbarians come out of a bush, and they're like, "Oh, it's the barbarians again." Like,
that's the thing about like doing random combat encounters like that as well, is because, well, okay, one, random encounter tables don't account for non-combat encounters. You can have encounters that are not combat, that you might meet a traveler, a merchant, a some sort of, I don't know, wandering wizard on the road. You can find a whole bunch of other stuff, and they don't have to be combat. The other thing about the random encounter tables is that you might end up doing something like that, where you are fighting the same thing multiple times.
yeah,
And honestly, like, combat is really fun in D&D. I have a great time doing it. You know, depending on the character you have, you might be very combat oriented. In which case, yeah, let's get that barbarian raging up and right into the center of these guys. But you need to put some variety in your combat encounters, because otherwise, how many times can the players fight similar enemies or even the same enemies over and over, until, even if you change the battle map a little bit, and even if you say, oh, this time it's dark out while it happens or something, you need to add more to make those encounters interesting, and have them feed into your world. And that's why I'm saying, like, the random encounter table, it just doesn't offer enough, I don't think. I would much rather that, like, every second option on the table was like, you meet a traveling merchant, or you meet an injured soldier or something like that, and these are opportunities for social encounters that aren't necessarily combat only.
yeah. No, it'd be cool if it was like social encounter, combat encounter, social encounter, combat encounter, social
Yeah.
encounter. One thing that always put me off about random tables was when I read it, and when I was an early DM and was reading the random tables, and it was like, oh, I could potentially roll a green dragon here for the mountains. I, I,
Yeah.
I just want like two orcs. I just want like two orcs. I don't want a green dragon when my players are level 3.
Yeah, and like, even if it was like a green dragon wormling or something like that, like, there's certain monsters, and we've definitely
I
mentioned this
think
in the
it's a
podcast
young
before.
green dragon, from what I remember.
Young is like the second level. I think you can get green dragon wormling as well.
Yeah, you
But I
can.
mean, like,
Well, I think like on the actual random
oh,
table,
okay.
it's on the table entry. At least I could be very wrong, but I think it's a young green dragon, and I just remember being
Yeah.
like, my guys are like level fucking 4. They don't even have a magic weapon yet. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not. Why would I roll this in case I get a green dragon and just kills my whole party?
And the thing is, like, it's fine when the encounters. Well, okay. Here's the double-edged sword, or the double-edged sword on this. On the one hand, you could go and just put a bunch of stuff on it that's like fairly generic, like bandits and orcs and goblins and kobolds and all that, which would be, after a while, we get very bland and very, boring, fighting the same, groups of humanoids, whatever, over and over. On the other hand, you can put things down like certain types of demons and dragons and really interesting stuff like that. But like, and I distinctly remember us bringing this up on the podcast before, and it's more of a thing at high level, but it counts for low level as well. If I'm going to put a green dragon into my game, wormling, young, adult, legendary, it doesn't matter. I'm going to have a real reason as to why they're here. They're going to be a focal point of some sort of intrigue or quest, or some region, like this dragon hunts in this region and is known by the nearby town, so we don't go to that part of the forest.
I've got that
Like,
in I've like a Celt Viking place called Anvarktir, and they have like the quest line I've always given my players when they ask about what's going on there is, there's a terrible beast that's taken up root, up nest in the King's Hall for the last 50 years, and no one has been able to vanquish it. So they all
yes,
just
you've told
live
us this
down.
before, yeah.
Yeah, and so that is a black dragon. My players know this by now. It's a black dragon, and like that is like, if they go there, that is the quest. Like, you're gonna travel, find, fight, and kill a black dragon that no one else in this country has been able to.
Yeah, and like, but I mean, like, that's the thing. I don't feel like I could just drop a dragon, or if we talked about it before, because when it comes to higher level. Actually, do you know what it was? It was our episode on challenge rating. And random tables, because we brought up, like, if you're a high level party traveling
That
from
was
town
it,
to town,
yeah,
and you're level 15, and you roll, it's like, oh, a pit fiend wanders out of the temperate green forest. It's like, what? Like,
Yeah.
I need, like, or even if you describe it better than that, even if you say, like, oh, you watch as the ground in the middle of the road tears open and there's a flaming hole and this pit fiend crawls out of it. slightly cooler. Why is that happening right here in the middle of the road, right as you guys just happen to be walking down it? You'd have to give some sort of context or some sort of bearing because you can't just throw random monsters in, as far as I'm concerned, anyway. You
Yeah.
can't just drop some of these high level iconic monsters in. You can't just roll and be like, oh, you guys are walking through the icy tundra and a beholder attacks. I'm like, what? Like,
I was literally thinking Beholder the entire
yeah.
time.
Like,
Yeah,
because I mean, yeah, again, a beholder is an iconic monster that
it's
I
on
want to
the
center a
cover of
quest
the
around
monster
them.
manual. That's how fucking iconic the Beholder is. Like you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think it'd be better for the random tables if it was like social and combat encounters and other stuff. For so what? Actually, no, I'd probably be the same thing. Kind of stepping on your world building toes would be if they were like, combat encounter, social encounter, exploration encounter, maybe where it's like, oh, he finds an abandoned mine, and then like it's like abandoned mine, this much gold, this many magic items.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I could see that being pretty good though, because then you could do things like, uh, I don't know, you could be like put down something like a ruin or something like that, and maybe there's an additional table. And again, I see what you mean by potentially stepping on world building, but you could put down like, oh, you find the ruin, and it is a rolls dice dwarven ruin, and maybe it's only that could be sometimes stuff like that is good for world building, and you have to try and make it fit. But if you're very particular about world building and like kind of it might, yeah, it could step on your toes or kind of interrupt what is otherwise a very specific tone you're setting.
Yeah.
If you're in like a kind of Slavic like Dracula style, like what's it called, Ravenloft style campaign or something like that in Barovia, and you roll something then, and it's like, oh, you find an ancient ruin, and it is celestial.
Mm.
Yeah, or that, but okay, I said that, and I immediately I can make that fit. So that's a poor example,
It's a
but
flump.
yeah, exactly. Roll a combat counter. There's flumps everywhere.
Yeah.
Um,
Flumps it hard, man. Flumps KO'd lug once.
you would like 1 hit point though. Um, but yeah, so yeah, I think making the encounter part of it, making the encounter relevant.
Mm.
If we're going to do anything, not always making your encounter something that is combat related. Making it something can be exploration related. It can be it can be a social interaction with an NPC you find on the side of the road, whether that be again like, pardon me, whether that be like a merchant or an injured soldier or a bandit who was abandoned by the rest of his people, like his guys and left for dead or something like that. And it might spin off into something else. That bandit might be like, hey, look, they left me here tied up for dead, so the wolves could have me. If you free me and come and kill them in revenge, I'll give you half the cost.
Mm.
It could spawn a whole other thing. Um, Again, though, you want to make sure it's relevant to the world in what you're doing. Um, I learned something, and I cannot remember whose video this was. There was a woman. She had D&D videos up. I believe she mentioned in the video that she was not a fan of fifth edition, and I think she played 3 or 3.5.
Mm.
And she had a rule, just a handy little kind of handy little rule for travel. And this kind of feeds into my next point I want to talk about. Her rule was when you're traveling anywhere, depending on the distance of the journey, whether it be something that is, very close by, maybe a little bit further away, or very far away, you put in either 1, 2, or 3 encounters, respectively.
Yeah. No, I
So
actually
if
like that.
Yeah, so if you're going to the next village over, which is a day or 2 days travel away, you would only put in a single combat or social encounter. You only meet one person on the road or encounter one thing.
Mm.
If you're going like from one side of the kingdom all the way to the capital on the other side, that might take closer to a week. So that could be 2 encounters. Again, they could be social or combat. And if you're going like, oh, I need to travel not just to the next kingdom, but to the northern half of the next kingdom, so it's even further away, and that's going to take us like a month. You can kind of montage that a little bit by saying, oh, you encounter some like bad weather here and other stuff here and whatever, but you perforated throughout this, you're going to put 3 encounters at certain points, and these 3 encounters are going to convey to the players, and I mean specifically the players, not the characters, the players, that this is a longer journey,
Mm.
because three encounters like that could potentially take 2 sessions, whereas a single encounter might take an hour. So we want to go to the next village. Great. In an hour of real life time, you're in the next village having fought the goblins along the way. If you want to go to this other place, it might be a case of, okay, it's going to be like a week to get there. You have 2 encounters. That's going to take up the whole session. So for the players in real life, it's going to be next week before they get a chance to actually do anything in that town, because at the end of the session, they might just be arriving, you know? And it's a really simple rule, but I actually think it's one I've always stuck by when it comes to traveling. I specifically put 3 encounters. When you guys left Temerai on your way to Solaster, and you stopped over in Pontier, which was on the road there were 3 encounters between Pontier and Temerai, and that was about a week's worth of travel. So you met some soldiers on the road, which was a social interaction. You got attacked by some undead that came out of the forest, and then you fought the Knight of the Moon, the Redirna Lay, Fey Knight. And then after that, like a day later, you arrived in Pontier. And I think it conveyed pretty accurately that that was a decent length journey through some harsh weather as well, because you guys were rolling for some con checks and stuff. Yeah. And like I said, actually, when you fought the knight as well, Aerith had disadvantage on his attacks with his bow because of the wind was really high at that time as well. So I feel like that was... I don't travel very often, but I think that can be really good as well. It's a very simple rule, but I do feel like it can be extrapolated into a very solid template for how you want to handle travel, or how to do it without, because we talked a while ago about the difference of, do you want to montage this, or do you want to do a day by day thing? The day by day thing can be so tedious, like, you know, particularly when it comes to like looking for food and
setting watches and stuff. Yeah. I find with that a lot of the time it can just evolve. If you're doing that kind of stuff, it's probably why I don't really like doing traveling, because it's happened to me a lot. Is when if you are doing the day by day thing, after like 2 goes, it devolves into excuse me, after 2 goes, it devolves into, okay, you roll for the weather. All right, you get this far in the day, this is what you see, make camp. And then the next day is like, okay, who's rolling, who's leading us, who's leading the way, make a survival check.
Well, it's even more than that, and that's actually one thing I do want to get into with you. In between your actual traveling, you're camping out in the middle of the night, and someone's got to keep watch. And that means, and I do it a lot, but I think I need to find a different system for it in our games. Is I have you guys, because here's the thing, let's say it takes 10 days to travel, right?
Yeah.
And we are describing each day and describing you guys at night, taking watches and getting your long rests while you're around the campfire, and someone's always keeping an eye out. I'm having each of you, if there's 4 people in the party and each person's doing 1 watch, I'm having each of you roll 10 perception checks in a row, essentially. Unless it's an encounter of some kind. But every single night, I'm going to make a perception check to see if you can keep watch effectively. And the next night, I do the same thing. And the same thing for each of the characters. And like the problem is, and it's very easy to say that we could just scrap that and not do that. But what happens then when I want to put an encounter that night? I want you guys to be ambushed. If I never normally describe you in camp or the sun setting or any of you taking watch, the one night I ask you to make perception checks because you can be attacked is the one night that it'll telegraph to you, oh, Connor obviously has something planned for tonight because he's asked us to make perception checks and he hasn't done it the past 4 nights that we've been traveling, so obviously something's coming up now, you know?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it wasn't the encounter with the Knight of the Moon that happened because someone was up watching and when it arrived, wasn't it?
I think Aerith was he was sitting up on top of the carriage, keeping an eye out on the side of the road. Yeah. And then 2 arrows came out and hit him, and he quickly rolled off and took cover behind the thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky one because I don't want to leave myself unable to ambush you guys in the night if I think that that's an encounter that'd be fun or it could happen. But I also don't want to, if I don't have any encounters planned, to skip over the 5 days of travel and be like, oh, no perception checks required because obviously Connor does not have anything planned. But again, the one night where I'm like, oh, this night, can I have to make perception checks? It's like, obviously there's something out there to be seen if I do that,
Yeah, it's like when you're like, what's everyone's dexterity save? And
exactly. So something's coming. Although to be fair, I do that to you guys sometimes. I used to do it a lot in the first campaign. Yeah. I'd message you randomly. I'd be like, hey, what's your con save? and you'd be like, "Oh no,
The one,
it's this." I'm like, "Cool, cool." Oh no, I wouldn't even say cool. I'd be like, "That's good to know, thank you."
yeah, the one that always got me was you'd be in the group, you'd message our D&D group and be like, "How much health's everybody got?"
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And like the thing is, I would always do it if I asked one of you, and like let's say for example, I needed to know what Eru's max health was in the last campaign. If I asked you, I'd ask everyone, but I'm only looking for you. But I'd ask everyone so as not to arouse suspicion. But then of course everyone's like, "What's he got planned?" Because he's asking about our max health. Which I'm not gonna lie, I don't like being a DM like a DM who is like against the players,
yeah,
but I do get a little sick kick out of taunting you guys by being like, "Hey, Martin, out of curiosity, what's your dexterity saving throw?"
enough.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, no, I
actually
do.
plus 0 viewers, so yeah,
But you have advantage.
I do on
Right.
advantage of plus
Danger
0.
sense, baby.
Yeah,
No, so yeah, it's a weird one. To be honest, if it seems weird bringing it up on the podcast, we're going to talk about our experiences when I'm like, I haven't figured this one out yet. But yeah, question for you as well.
yeah,
Just to move on a little bit. Um, do you track food, water, and all that kind of stuff?
not at all.
No. Okay.
No,
Interesting.
no,
I
I don't feel
we,
it's
we,
relevant to the game
no, that's fair. I
unless it's
think
in specifically an area where that resource is limited. Like
I get you.
if they're in a desert, I'm going to be like, you need to keep an eye. You're going to a desert. You guys know you need to keep an eye on your water. Or if they're in a particularly harsh and like cold area with not a lot alive, I might be like, you need warm clothes or a fire,
Yeah.
or like you need to bring your own food with you, or like take the risk of going hunting and potentially not catching anything,
Yeah.
and just having to deal with that. But otherwise, no, it's like what I was saying earlier. I can appreciate the effort of people who do go through with tracking rations and heat and water and all and ammunition and all this stuff. And like, I love players who track their own ammunition. They're great. I love them. Every player should do that if they have ammunition, in my opinion. But yeah, it's not really something, because I don't play D&D to play Minecraft.
No, that's fair. I think it's totally fair. I think
Yeah,
D&D, I think first and foremost, is a game about a party of misfits going on an adventure to what is likely find a monster, kill them, and take their hoard of treasure. I
yes,
think that's on a fundamental level. That's what primarily what D&D is about. I I think it's fine if a dungeon master in like a session 0 or whatever telegraphs to the players, hey, it's going to be kind of a survival based game. It's going to be it's going to be in like a frontier town or something
yeah.
like that, or there isn't always supplies
I
available.
think if you're going to do that, you have to make that super clear as well, because
Yeah,
otherwise you'll get
yeah.
such a massive amount of backlash from your players.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I could have a lot of fun with if a DM came to me and said that, and so we're going to do kind of a survivalist game. Maybe it's a post-apocalyptic thing. Maybe undead have overrun this entire kingdom, so now we're trapped in this one little walled town, and we have to go outside the walls to get food and do all this other stuff to keep the town going. I'd have a great crack with that, and especially particularly if I'm like, hey, arrows are really tough to come by with my bow, so now I gotta like worry about crafting arrows and not lose these or leave them behind. Or if I need to worry about how much food do I have when I go out to make sure, hey, that's a 3-day journey, so I need 3 days worth of food and 3 days back again. Um, I I try to simplify it down because I feel like there's certain parts of certain characters that make it fun to make it relevant. You are playing I think technically it's the Uthgard tribesman or something like that
Yeah.
is your background, but we just do it as a Kale tribesman. But yeah, you have a feature where you can harvest twice as much food when you do go foraging or hunting.
Yeah, we had a good laugh about that last session as well. Because Eretz is like, I can start a rebellion and common people will help me. And I was like, I can find twice as much food.
Yeah. But I like that though. I played a ranger for a while. I never got to use that. But it's fun when you get to use his abilities. I think you've only used it once proper, but
I've only needed
used,
to
I
use it
think.
once.
Sorry.
I've only needed to use it once, really. It was that time when
Yeah.
before we were going underground, where there wouldn't be food underground. And I just
Yeah.
went hunting, but yeah, I went hunting that time. But yeah, no, it was useful when it's come up, yeah.
Yeah, and I think like and I mean if you simplify it down, it can be easy enough that I feel anyway it doesn't become cumbersome.
I do wish there
Because
was a bit more to it.
like more mechanics to it.
Yeah, more that it does more. Like, like very much like it was just that that's why I made the joke. Like, I can get twice as much food, and Eris is like, oh, he's got the, I can't remember exactly what his is, a haunted one. Is this one?
Haunted one, I think, is his
Yeah,
background.
and
Yeah.
haunted one is like, oh, common folk will shelter you in times of trouble, and they will do everything they can to help you and all this kind of stuff. And I was like,
Yeah.
I can find food, guys.
Yeah, I remember when you did that because yeah, you guys were going kind of into your Underdark thing. I do have you guys track rations,
Yeah.
but like I said, I try to simplify it as much as possible because I have you guys basically say, look, have rations which are in the player's handbook. You know, there's a price there for them. If you're low on them, just say, hey DM, I'm going to buy X amount, mark down to gold, simple as, and you basically use a ration for every day that you are not in a town or village, or city. If you're in a town or village or city, I'm assuming that you have ready access to food and there's no problem. Particularly if you're staying in an inn, I just assume your meals are included if you pay for an inn
Yeah.
to get a room there. But if you're out and you're traveling in the wilderness, I just like the idea of you guys having to do that. Like I said, you had that moment I thought was quite cool because background features don't get used as often, I think, as class features or racial features.
I
Um,
think it depends. There are some that are super, like, I think, like, if you're a criminal gets used a lot. If
Criminal, yeah, because
you're
you have connections to
sin,
underworld organizations or something.
noble is really really useful too.
Because you can get you had this in the previous one, so you can get a an audience with a
Yeah,
lord or a ruler of a region. Yeah, yeah, which
exactly.
is helpful. It
Yeah.
is very helpful. Yeah. Um,
What else is
and
good?
and I think I like adding a mechanic that it makes your thing beneficial. You know, so like because what you did was you went out and you hunted a deer. And you took the deer and you brought it in, and it was a big deer because you're good at hunting and you can get
Mm,
twice as much food. And you brought it to a butcher, and you're like, "Hey, I don't have time for you to turn all this into like stuff. I'll just give you this full animal if you give me like X number of days worth of rations." And he was like, absolutely, here, take all the jerky and stuff that you need, no problem.
yeah.
Um, but that worked, and then you ended up having a ton of them. I think you gave some to the lads as well, so that they had some going underground.
I have like 14 days worth of rations.
Yeah.
For like it was like a 5 day trip or something. But
Uh,
that was me and the dog as well though. So like
oh, that's true,
I
actually.
count like just taking twice as many rations if we're using
Yeah,
rations because Frost is with me.
yeah. I don't count water. But that's again, like you said a while ago, you've always been in a region where water is readily available.
Hmm.
If I ever thought you weren't, like you're in the middle of a desert, then I'd have you start being concerned about water. Or if you're in a frozen area up north and there isn't access to food because animals are.
We'll literally never be concerned about water because we have the Aquamancer's bracer.
Uh, well, that is true. Uh, I think I gave you the decanter of endless water in the first campaign
Yeah,
as well.
that was mine. That was it. I used like a
Yeah,
speedboat so many times.
you just pop it in the water behind the boat and catch the geyser out of it. But yeah, I
Um,
mean, look, I think don't get me wrong. Any of that resource management stuff, like counting arrows, I think arrows should only be counted if you roll like a nat one, or if one of them, if you fire at a creature that's over a
yeah,
cliff and it misses, and it clearly, if it doesn't hit him, it's definitely gone down over that cliff. Then you should mark down arrows and stuff.
my
Other than that, I don't feel like there's really a need for
yeah,
it. But
my gunslinger tracks his bullets, and I think that's totally appropriate because there's a big difference between firing an arrow and firing a bullet. When you fire a bullet, there's
yeah,
a component of that bullet that gets discarded.
yeah,
Whereas with the
absolutely.
arrow, you can literally just pick the arrow up.
Yeah, and I mean, like when you think about it, most combat encounters last like most like at highest like 5 or 6 rounds, and if
Mm.
you fire 2 attacks per round, that's 12 arrows, and you usually have a quiver of 20. I think most people are never going to go like to 10 full
Yeah.
rounds of combat, unless it's no, maybe it will, but I think most combats we have don't. They tend to last between 3 and 5 rounds mostly. So yeah, no, that's interesting. I get why people don't want to track that stuff sometimes, but I like I mentioned this before. I like the bookkeeping side of it. I like the cost of living thing in the game where I have X amount of gold. I'm being charged for my accommodation and my food while I'm here. Oh, we need to travel to this mountain that's 3 days away. I'll go buy 6 days worth of rations, or even seven, just to be on the safe side. And like, I like managing resources like that. I like doing it in survival games like Minecraft or Rust or anything like that. I
Yeah.
love all that kind of stuff.
I'm
So I
not.
can see myself being very fond of it. But I'm also acutely aware that I do not want to make it just because I enjoy it doesn't mean you guys will enjoy it. So I try to make it as palatable as possible while still being able to run that aspect of the game
Yeah.
that I want to, making it as palatable as possible for you guys, that you don't feel like, oh, Connor's making us do this thing again.
Yeah,
Oh, I hate this mechanic.
I will say I've never like anytime you have introduced like okay no like we're like I like it's, the ones I can remember from this campaign is like Slaster when we were going to Slaster and you were like it's very cold here like the only reason I was fine was because I had my boots of the Winterlands, not Hinterlands.
Yeah,
And so I've resistance to cold, so I didn't really need that. I didn't really need to buy them. And then, but the one, yeah, like when we were going underground, we had to get rations. I was like, yeah, I wasn't like, oh fuck's sake, Connor making me fucking kill a deer. I was like, oh no, that makes total sense. Like yeah, and like it wasn't something I would have thought of myself necessarily. Heading in, but I was like, yeah, no, we're literally our goal is to go as deep underground as possible, where like people have not lived for like potentially centuries. Yeah, no, we are going to need to bring food, and like, yeah, that made perfect sense. So like, I really didn't have a problem with that. I actually really liked how we did the travel for down to the Ulthraf and through like Endlechheim and all those layers. I really enjoyed that actually travel experience.
yeah. I feel like actually probably more so than the journey you guys took to Solaster, which was on the surface and mostly just you guys in a carriage on the road. With a couple of encounters in there to break it up. You guys did also have that you guys going down there.
Yeah.
That actually that's probably a pretty good example of how the quest is the journey or the journey is the quest.
Yeah.
Because you had to go through the sewers, which was an interesting thing with some combat encounters and some unique interactions. Then some putrid caves that were literally like neck high in like human waste. And then you had to go to like Vishalai, which was the Elven Undercity thing. And then after Vishalai, you went down into like Underdark proper, where there was all the Balgwin.
Yeah.
And then through Endlechheim, and then Landerstad, and then there was a volcanic aspect as well, an old volcanic fortress on an island.
Yeah.
Followed by some other a lava tube situation. I mean, yeah, I mean, like it was diverse enough, and like again, I think that's actually a pretty good example of how the journey, because your journey was to get to Ulthref, the inverted city, and find out what was causing all these horrific dreams that were killing people and causing them to have sleepless nights. But the journey to get there was interesting and exploratory and stuff like that. So you keep it.
Yeah.
It's easy to do a thing underground because you can just make things weird and it has very little bearing on the surface world. But if you just go like, oh, you're traveling to the next village over, well, guess what? There's like a portal to the ice plane that opens up in that road once every 2 weeks.
I like that. Yeah. Oh, actually, random question. Not a question rather. I still want to know what was behind that dead stone giant. There was like a dead stone giant leaning against the door, and we couldn't move him in time because we were running from something. And I've always wanted to know what was behind that door.
Yes. So I think if I'm rightly, you guys you went into Endlechheim, which is an old underground giant enclave, a stone giant enclave. You went in, but as you were going in, you kind of realized when you were already a bit too far in that the Balgwin, these cursed elves, use this basically as a shortcut to get back and forth to their own like home here. Well, and they go out hunting, and you're like, oh, we're like right in the middle of their like highway that they use down here. So you need to run and barricade the door. And there was one door that had a dead stone giant who had like leaning against it and stuff like that. And I don't think you can move him because he was way too heavy.
I tried so hard.
Yeah, if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't remember off the top of my head. I could check my notes.
I didn't think you. No, there's no need for you to know off the top of your head, really, because that's got to be like 6 months ago at this point.
Oh, easily. That was before Gavin was even in the game.
No, it wasn't.
I take that back. It wasn't. My bad. Yeah, sorry. He was. He joined just before that. Actually, my mistake. Yeah.
That was our first quest as a group together. Was to go down and stop the nightmares.
As a 4-person group. Yeah. You mentioned something a second ago, and I was going to bring it up. No, blanking. We'll move on to something else in that case.
I'm sure it'll come back.
Yeah, probably. It'll come back to me in 2 days' time, and I'll message you like, hey, Mark, remember that thing I was going to say? So there are lots of different forms of transport in D&D. Whether you have, like you said, on foot, you could have a mount like a horse or an axe beak. You could have a flying mount like a griffin or a hippogriff.
Or
Um,
dragon.
Dragons, wyverns. Oh, what are the ones called in?
Drakes.
No, there's one in Fizzbands that we were raving about when the book came out. It was like a
Oh,
drag. Is it a
yes.
dragonette?
Yeah, yeah, something like that. It's like Dragonair or something.
Yeah, they were
Dragonelle.
cool.
Dragonelle.
Dragonelle.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they were cool. So there's also lots of mountain stuff we can do, but there's also like vehicles. You can get
Yeah.
carriages, whether they be whatever animal pulls them. Um, you mentioned airships from your world a while ago.
Yep. Barbs get
What
land vehicles as proficiency.
You get land vehicle proficiency as well. What kind of vehicles or other forms of transport do you have in your world, and are they like commercially available? 'Cause you mentioned airships, but I'm wondering, do you have anything else that's commercially available that an adventuring party can go up to a captain of this ship or something like that and go, hey, if I give you, 3 gold ahead for each of us, will you bring us to the next town over?
Yeah, I have a lot of what you'll see very in your very like standard fantasy is a bit of an oxymoron, but like in your standard fantasy world where yeah, there's like fairly regular airship passages or airship journeys made from the 3 or 4 of the main continents that are around. Let's see, on in the and in terms of like unique or interesting stuff, I have on in the Japanese area my players went to for a little pirate arc. There was like an emergency escape kind of thing because the town got, well, rather not an emergency escape, it was used to evacuate people. But there's like this giant waterfall that connects every mountain, not every mountain, but every island to the one floating directly above it.
Right.
And they're mystical. And on the bottom one, you can go into these giant lotus flowers. And like as a group, like you go and you like hold hands as a group, and the lotus flower closes up around you, and then like floats up the waterfall, and brings
That's
you up
pretty
to
cool.
the next one, then opens again. I had that. I'm trying to think of anything else like. Yeah, no, I think that's probably the most unique one I have, other than just like teleportation. There's a lot of transfer via plants. The nine
That's
castle.
if you have a druid in your party, transport via plants is just like such a go-to.
Yeah, and the 9 castles I'm in, they're all connected to each other by teleportation circles. But only certain castles can go to certain other castles. So
So you
like
couldn't go from like 1 to 9.
no, like one had like 2 and 3, and like either 2 or 3 had 4 and 5 together, and then once they got to the middle, they were a little bit more broken up, or like 5 might only have like 7 and 8 on it,
Right.
and no 6, and then like but by the time they got to like they were in like the 6th castle, all of they found 2 or 3 times now they've come across fully working teleportation circles, and they have not taken them to skip straight to.
Like, yeah,
Like they could go like they when they killed Mimir, the science leader, he had a perfectly functioning, like fully functioning teleportation circle in the basement of his area, which they found
yeah.
and saw and went, that works perfectly, we could go all the way right to the end now, skip 4 castles. And they went, we need to look in every castle though, because that like skull thing we need to find to open the storm barrier that has everyone trapped inside it we need to find that, and that could be in any castle, and I know where it is, and it's not in any castle, it's in a specific one. Like,
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, if you, I mean, players want to explore. Players
yeah,
want to make sure they're not missing anything. It's a thing you do in video games. It's a very video game mentality where
Skyrim
you're like, oh,
disease.
but what if, yeah, but
Yeah,
what if this side room has a chest in it with stuff in it? I want that stuff.
yeah, it's kind of my own fault as well, but at the same time, if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have to design. It's the place with the Doomwake droid. It's called a Martime, which means like Doom Home. It's like a combination of like Nordic and Elvish actually, because Amon Amarth is Mount Doom in Elvish. But like that, I wouldn't have written up that area really if they weren't like so intent on going to every single castle. You know what? Out of them all now that I've made, I think that one's probably my favorite because it's just been really fun to do like messed up, twisted, like dream come true monkey paw scenarios with people. It's been a lot of fun like that. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and maybe so in my world I have there are obviously boats and carriages, but there's also airships, and
Yeah.
then there's also trains. There are functioning trains that run between certain towns. The rail lines don't run everywhere, but they run between certain big towns and stuff like that. Do how and maybe this is me overthinking the world building of everything, but do you have an idea of how your airships work?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
what is the magic of that, or if it even is magic, like what actually lifts them and stuff like that?
They're like a combination of drones and sea ships. Like there's imagine like a quadcopter a drone scaled up to the size of like an ocean faring
A
vessel,
galleon, like
like a galleon, yeah. And then
yeah,
you stick the four quadcopter legs onto the ship, and they have giant glowing magic crystals, and
right.
those crystals are enchanted with a fly spell, and they make the sky ship fly.
Okay, cool. So it's very similar to the Mercer one then, where it's the propulsion and the lift is all generated by these crystals that levitate it.
I think in Mercer's one now, isn't it in Alexandria now? It's they're made of this like blue stone that is like the remnants of the floating cities of Aor.
Oh yes, I feel like yeah,
It's
that's
like
a good question. I'd have to look into that.
I'm like I want to say I'm like 85% certain it is. I remember him talking about it where like I think
Is
like
it
it's
broomstone or something like that?
yes, Broomstone or
Yeah,
Bloomstone, one of the two. But
something
yeah,
like
it's the stone that the Aeorians used to make their cities fly, and when the
that.
cities
Yeah,
crashed to the earth and like were destroyed, the Broomstone or Broomstone, whatever it is, was left behind, and that was then gathered
yeah,
and like you rendered and used to make the like the crystals or stones or whatever it is for the flying ships. I just really
yep,
like the idea of like a giant like quadcopter like
yeah,
galleon with like giant crystals that like because it feels like it'd be very stable as well. But yeah,
yeah.
it's just cool and I like it. And then you can stick ballista on everything.
Yeah. No, I was because I have airships in my world, but I honestly I kind of go back and forth on the style of them and how they should work, and if there should be different types. Like
I feel like you
I
would. I haven't done it myself, but I feel like unless there was just one design that was massively optimal, you would get different designs because that
oh
happens
yeah,
with
yeah,
ships. Like that happened that like there's reasons we have different ships and different and why some
different
ships are fast.
shapes, different shape sails and stuff like that.
Exactly, like part of the
Yeah,
reason the Vikings were so successful with their like raids and invasions is because their ships could both go across the ocean and also sail up rivers. Like that's why
yeah,
they were so. That's why it was so effective. So I feel like if there were like sky ships and the like, that they would have something similar. You know, they'd vary probably based on both culture and intent. Like I was saying, the one I gave my party because it was like it was something I actually just invented for that session. I like once I decided the castle was a refinery castle, like basically like an ore refinery built into a castle. I was like, well, they'd have to bring the ore there somehow, and this castle is like thousands of feet in the air. So how would
there'd
they
have to
do
be
it?
some sort of ship that can carry it.
Yeah, I was like, they're very technologically advanced. Yeah, a skyship makes perfect sense. And it's basically that one is probably my favorite one because the other ones are explicitly magical. This one is a technological thing with a slightly magical twist to it. In that,
Right.
like, it's like a big metal skyship, and at the bottom is like, do you know how like LED lights are set into a roof?
Yeah.
So like the bottom of the ship looks like that, but they're all thruster rockets at the bottom for
Oh,
upward
cool.
thrust, and then there's still like a rudder and keel on it. And sorry, there's a rudder on it. The keel is the line that goes all the way down the ship, but there's still a
Yeah.
rudder on it, and the rudder has these two big rocket engines mounted to either side of the rudder. So if you want to turn it, the bottom of the ship keeps it aloft, and then the rudder has two big powerful engines to give it the forward thrust and the directional thrust.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. I was thinking about this recently because I saw a couple of art things pop up on Twitter, which I really like the look of. This I can't remember the name of the artist now. He drew this really cool airship from like to the underside, and it looked like. See, a lot of times you get in fantasy, you get airships that have the big dirigible balloon, proper blimp style ones that are just carrying the ship underneath by chains or ropes or whatever it is. And I don't have a problem with that so much. I think that's a good design. It's a classic design. It works for a lot of people. My whole thing is, I'm like, what if I like, okay, well, if these things are meant to be like military ships carrying soldiers and all that, what happens then when anyone fires like a single ballista or a single cannon into that big balloon? They're going to drop out of the sky. So I have a hard time justifying this in my head. I had a couple different ideas I wanted to put in that I haven't quite settled on yet. I'm trying to redesign. Like, okay, so what they do when they do that kind of ship thing, this is me getting really obsessive about it now. What they do when they basically take that kind of galleon style ship and just stick a balloon on it, no one makes accounts for the fact that the reason ships are the way they are, right? The reason that the helm is up on the top highest point at the back is so that one, you can see everything around you. Two, you can see everything in front of you, and you can also see behind you. Basically, perfect sight lines. You can also look at your crew while you are steering the ship as well. So they have sight line and everything, right? Um, that makes sense if you're on the water and you need to be up so you can see faraway ships in all directions, all this kind of stuff, right? It does not make sense if you're in an airship that is in the sky when enemies can very easily be below you or down below your sight level and you can't see them over the edge. So one thing I've already
I
done.
wasn't even thinking below you. It's like if you mount a giant balloon over your ship, you have no more visibility above you in an area with wyverns and potentially dragons and things that will. I'm just thinking of that scene from that awful Avatar movie where he's like, the most dangerous one never looks above, so he takes like his dragon thing way high up in the air above the big scary dragon thing because that's the top of the food chain, so it doesn't look above, which makes no sense. So so he like dives down on top, but like bird strike is a real thing that planes worry about in our world. Like planes engines getting taken down by birds flying into the mid-flight. Like there's like rocks and stuff in D&D. And like I don't mean like Dwayne Johnson. I mean like the giant big scary giant bird. Like
like you could honestly, I mean, those things are so big you could just see one of them swooping down. The balloon is kind of here, and they just sink their claws into it
and pop it like a. Like, I just in my head I imagine like an eagle sinking its talons into an American football. Just.
Yeah, and like that's the thing. I mean, I'm definitely overthinking it, and I think if you just want to stick, these things into your world and make it work that way. But I'm like, is it gas? Is it like, is there an air elemental trapped in there? Like what's? Yeah, that's very Eberron. I have some notes because Eberron do a thing where they bind fire and air elementals to their ships to give them lift and thrust, which is very cool. I really like that.
I like how
same with the lightning rail in Eberron is also like a lightning elemental that is bound. I think it's a lightning elemental that is bound to the rail, and that's what lets it lift off and then hover and fly along. It's really cool.
I always liked how they did it in Avatar with the Fire Nation blimps.
Yeah, they were quite good. But again, they kind of suffer from a similar problem where they don't have a lot of like room in them. They make them seem way bigger, but realistically, blimps had the small underdeck and a little bit like a few catwalks and stuff up inside the actual floating part. But for the most part, blimps were like not really designed to transport large amounts of people, or heavy things for that matter. So I've been thinking about it a lot. One thing I did to kind of alleviate that is I moved. If the ship is here, and normally you're up the back here at the highest point where the helm would be. The helm is actually in the front and low down, so you can see the ground. You can see straight ahead of you and out kind of out to your sides, and you can see the ground beneath you. Because realistically, you're going to be touching down into whatever sky dock or whatever you kind of have. You should be able to see the ground you're coming towards and not just kind of be judging it by like, hopefully I don't wreck the bottom of my ship because I'm on top of it and can't see how close I am to the ground.
I'd love to do like, do you know Da Vinci's flying machine? I'd love to do that as an airship. I think that'd be a cool airship where it actually flaps.
There's not a huge amount of art and stuff out there for it, but look up Da Vinci Punk, and you get a lot of his style of flying contraptions, particularly with the Da Vinci screw propeller. Which I really love. It's in all the Final Fantasy games, which I love.
I've always just loved the do you know like the flying machine one that like it looks like it's designed to be like strapped onto your back, and it's the one you use in Assassin's Creed 2.
I was going to say it's the one that's hanging in the concert hall in UL.
That's literally what I was about to say. I was about to say that one hung in my university for years now, but I was just like look it up and it like that's mad, that's insane, and also be like, please don't fall on me as I walk under you.
I know, right? But yeah, like, I think look up Da Vinci Punk because I think they had some really cool concepts. But yeah, a couple of ideas I had about how it could work. I had this idea for like an elemental metal, like an air, like a metal that basically like an if. So I have a thing where like the Titan god fell on the world and died. I thought, what if the air elemental one died in a particular region where all these hills had like a lot of iron in it, and now that iron is infused with air elemental energy. So if you take that and craft it into rings and attach these rings to your ship, they can cause air to thrust them upwards or forwards, or they can become levitated because of all the air elemental energy inside of them.
I actually really like that. I think that's good. Like I love just being creative with monster bits like that. I think like it could be cool to make like the D&D equivalent of a Boeing 747, and what you've done is you've like hollowed out a rock.
Oh yeah, I like taking like even building a wooden ship, but having the front of it be the head of a rock. So it looks like really like fantasy-ish and stuff like that,
Just so you really fuck with whatever town you're going to.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's like, oh my god.
Fire the trebuchet! You're like, no!
But the reason I bring actually that up, and these kind of vehicles and stuff like that, they can offer. Well, they can be a good way if you don't want to do the travel thing at all. They can be a really good way or a whole other dimension on how you could be like, oh, you're going to travel on the train to get to this other town. If you're into that kind of more steampunky, slightly more industrial thing. I know some people don't like airships. They don't like anything that isn't hardcore 12th century medieval stuff. Like,
Dude, some people have serious issues with the gunslinger still, and I'm like, would you fuck off? Because we've 5 minutes left. Like, no, it's fantasy. If I can, like, no, stop putting unnecessary rules on it. Like, fuck it. If I want to be a Percival von Frankenstein, Musil Kowalski, the role of the third, thank you. I will do it. I will be the guy who invents the gun, and it'll be a really cool steampunky gun, like Bad News.
Yeah, I think yeah, I get some players, like some players or DMs, I should say, have very strict ideas on what it should be, and maybe even players. So players might come into a game and think, I'm going to be a knight, just like a proper chivalrous knight, and then someone else is going to be like, I'm a silly bard, and I have an electric lute, and this other kind of stupid stuff. I
was going to say I'm a dragon monk.
Yeah. So I'm a dragon monk. I can breathe acid on command. You have a sword.
I have a sword and shield.
Yeah. And that's a whole other thing on session zeros and stuff like that. But yeah, I think if you introduce these things, they can be a great way to keep your players in the action at all times. If you don't want to get bogged down with the whole traveling thing, if managing resources, keeping watch in camp, and all this kind of stuff is just not for you, renting an airship, renting a carriage, or renting or getting a passage on a train. Can be great ways to just get your players straight to this new location so they can keep going and keep the story momentum behind them. The one thing I'll say about that is if you give your players the ability to get to places really, really fast, it means you need to have those places ready. Because in our campaign 1, I gave you guys, I talked about this before. In fact, actually, I think our second episode of the podcast is a storytime episode, and I talk about the invasion of Narveen, the Drow city by the Micflayers. You guys basically commandeer a Micflayer shuttle that's modeled after the puddle jumper in Stargate Atlantis, and you take that, and it has essentially a warp core or a drive core, whatever you want to call it, that lets you cast teleport in the thing, on the whole thing and its occupants once per day. So you can basically full on use warp drive to get anywhere you need to. And yeah, that made things it set a new challenge I did not foresee, where you got home super fast, and I was like, that's cool, you guys can get to all these places. And then all of a sudden you're like, hey, what if we want to go literally anywhere in the world? And I was like, oh no. And I remember when at one point Tara wanted to go back to her people who lived on a totally different continent, and I only had vague ideas of what they were about. And then you guys were like, let's try and get here, because Sage has been there, so she can totally cast teleport on the ship to make it go there. And I'm like, oh no. So I had to make it teleport the whole way there. And I think I had you guys on a beach on the edge of the continent and stuff like that. It's so. Cool introduction. I think if you give players an airship or anything that lets them get places faster than normal, very cool. I think great reward actually. You know, if player turns around and goes, "Hey, you got a skyship now," like you did with your players. But I think
I was very careful though. Can't teleport just as the speed of 120, and to make up for the no teleport, it's got an enlarged bag of holding.
Yeah, I was trying to really lean into that sci-fi thing at the time. So yeah. But Martin.
Yes, Connor.
That's all the time we have for today.
Oh man, it's been a long journey to get here, but I think we've come in right at the perfect time.
You just bookended this podcast with a journey thing at the start and a journey thing at the end.
It's because I'm that damn good, Connor.
I think it's a good episode. I think, like I said, I think a lot of people talk about travel as being something that's very difficult. I think what's important to know about travel is that you have a lot of options to do it the way you want. You can go day by day, hour by hour, if that's what you and your players want. You can do it. You can do it as a big montage thing. You can give them vehicles. You can not give them vehicles. They can have mounts or no mounts. There's a bunch of different stuff that can factor in. A lot of different challenges you can put in front of them, whether it be for navigation, weather, or what else? Checks, notes, pace. There we go.
Pace.
Yeah, and there's no reason that that traveling to the next town or moving from this small farm town to the capital city needs to be a tedious endeavor where you're just rolling dice to check for weather and make doing your watch in the evenings and stuff like that. You can make it interesting. My advice again, still avoid random encounter tables because I feel like they're never relevant enough, and I feel like they're strictly combat stuff, and there's a lot of stuff they're ignoring with random encounter tables. But do I think that rule of 1, 2, 3, whether the journey is short, like medium, or long, has done me pretty good. I wish I could remember the person I found. I found them. I don't think I've seen another video from them since. So I don't think they're a huge YouTuber, but she gave it was a really good bit of advice, and I've kept it the whole time, and I really feel like it scales well with both the players' perceptions of how long it takes to get somewhere and like the characters doing stuff. Or, like the challenge of a character traveling all that way to get there is reflected in how long it takes and what they have to do.
Yeah, totally.
So if you have any questions you would like us to ask, stories you'd like us to share, or topics you would like us to cover, please tweet us at Micflayers Pod. You'll find that on the lower screen. That's on Twitter. You can find a podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor Breaker, and Radio Republic. Martin, where can people find you on the internet?
You can mostly find me on the internet, on Twitter at So Sorry It's Over, which should be in the bottom right hand corner of my screen here, and then also on the Micflayers podcast Twitter, mentioned earlier at Micflayers Pod. Shoot us a message there if you ever have any questions or just want to share some memes. Always appreciative of memes. Connor, where can people find you on the
People
internet?
can find me on the internet on Twitter at 0.Connor, ZeroPointConor, 1N, very important. And as always, every Friday here at 6 p.m. Irish time on the Micflayers podcast and all the aforementioned platforms. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us. I hope this was enlightening. I hope you guys can have a bit of a better experience when running travel or when running these kind of things in your game going forward. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. That's all from us. Safe travels.
I was going to say it. Damn it. Safe travels, folks.
I beat you to it.